The cry pierced through the desert dawn like a bullet through silence. Jasper Kane pressed his bloodied hand against the gunshot wound in his chest, certain his mind was playing tricks on him. Men don't hear babies crying when they're bleeding out, alone in the wasteland. But there it was again, that desperate, innocent wail cutting through the morning air like a knife through his soul. He dragged himself toward the sound, each step sending fire through his ribs. The bullet had found its mark. 4 hours ago, courtesy of the Dalton gang's best shooter, Jasper had taken 2 of them down before catching lead, but the third had gotten away. Now he was dying, slow and painful, just like he'd always figured he would. The crying grew louder as he stumbled around a cluster of weathered rocks. What he saw made him forget the pain burning in his chest. There, sitting in the middle of nowhere, was a pine coffin, small, child-sized, and from inside came the unmistakable sound of a baby's desperate cries. Jasper fell to his knees beside the coffin, his vision blurring. The lid was slightly ajar, and through the gap he could see movement. A tiny fist pushed through the opening. Someone had put a living baby inside a coffin and left it, out here to die. His trembling hands lifted the lid completely, and his heart nearly stopped. A baby boy, maybe 7 months old, lay wrapped in a dirty blanket. The child's face was red from crying, but alive, very much alive. The baby's eyes found his, and for a moment the crying stopped. But it was what Jasper saw carved into the inside of the coffin lid that made his blood turn to ice. There, burned deep into the wood with crude letters, was a name. His name, Jasper Kane. Someone had put this baby in a coffin marked with his own name. Someone knew he would find it. Someone wanted him to find it. The baby reached toward him with tiny fingers, and Jasper felt something crack inside his chest that had nothing to do with the bullet wound. 38 years of living by the gun, he'd never held a child, never wanted to, never thought he deserved to touch something so pure with hands that had spilled so much blood. But as the baby's cries grew weaker, Jasper realized this child would die out. Here, if he didn't act, and he was dying too. 2 lives hanging by a thread in the middle of the desert, brought together by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The gunslinger lifted the baby from the coffin with shaking hands. The child, immediately quieted, tiny fingers grasping at his vest. For the first time in years, Jasper felt something other than emptiness in his chest. But who had done this? Who knew his name? Who knew he would be riding this trail today? And why leave a baby? To die in a coffin meant for him. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the desert, Jasper knew one thing for certain. Someone was playing a game with his life, and this innocent child was at the center of it all. The baby's grip on his vest was surprisingly strong for something so small. Jasper had seen men die with less fight in them. As he held the child against his chest, he felt a warmth spreading through his shirt, not blood this time, but something else entirely, something he'd forgotten existed. But staying here meant death for both of them. The desert sun was already climbing, and without water, the baby wouldn't last 2 hours. Jasper had maybe 4 hours left before blood loss took him. But that was without carrying extra weight. With the child, he'd be lucky to make it one. His horse, Thunder, stood 30 yards away, spooked but loyal enough to stay. The animal's ears twitched nervously as Jasper approached, blood still seeping from his chest. Wound. Thunder had carried him through 6 years of gunfights and close calls, but never with a baby in tow. Jasper managed to pull himself into the saddle, the baby cradled in his left arm. Every movement sent lightning through his ribs, but the child had stopped crying completely. Now, those dark eyes just stared up at him with an expression too wise for someone so young. As Thunder began walking toward town, Jasper's mind raced. Black Creek was 9 miles east, too far for a dying man. There was something closer. The old Barlow homestead, abandoned for 4 years since cholera took the family. If he could make it there, he might find supplies, maybe even figure out who was behind this twisted game. The baby made soft sounds, not a crying, but not completely content either. Jasper looked down and realized the child was hungry. Of course he was hungry. Someone had left him in a coffin to die. No telling how long he'd been out there. That's when it hit him like a punch to the gut. The coffin wasn't meant to be a grave. It was meant to be found. Someone knew his route, knew his timing, knew he'd be riding this trail after dealing with the Dalton gang. Someone wanted him to find this baby specifically. But who? And why use a child as bait? Thunder stumbled slightly, and Jasper felt his grip on consciousness slipping. The blood loss was catching up faster than he expected. He pressed his hand harder against the wound, but it was like trying to stop a river with his. The baby's eyes never left his face, as if sensing the danger they were both in. Those tiny fingers clutched at his vest with desperate strength. Then Jasper saw it. Smoke rising in the distance, not from the Barlow homestead, but from somewhere else. Someone had lit a fire, and it was coming from the direction he was heading. Someone was waiting for him. His free hand moved instinctively to his gun, but the movement sent fresh pain through his chest. If this was a trap, he was riding straight into it, with a dying body and a helpless baby in his arms. But what choice did he have? The desert would kill them both if he turned back. As thunder carried them toward the smoke, Jasper couldn't shake the feeling that every step was exactly what someone wanted him to take. Someone who knew about the baby, knew about the coffin, and knew he'd have no choice but to follow this path. The question burning in his mind, as fierce as the bullet wound, was simple. Was he saving this child, or was this child about to get them both killed? The smoke was coming from the Barlow homestead after all. As thunder crested the small hill, Jasper saw a figure moving around the abandoned homestead. A woman in a faded blue dress, tending to a fire outside the old cabin. She looked up as they approached, and Jasper felt his blood chill. He knew that face. Isabella Reyes, the woman whose husband he'd killed in Durango 3 years ago. The woman who'd sworn over her husband's grave that she'd make Jasper pay for leaving her children without a father. She was supposed to be in Mexico, hiding from the law after stealing money from the bank where she'd worked. Now she was here, in the middle of nowhere, with a fire already burning and supplies laid out like she'd been expecting company. The baby stirred in his arms as thunder slowed to a stop 20 feet from the cabin. Isabella stood slowly, her hands empty, but her eyes filled with something darker than hatred. She was older now. Lines of grief carved deep around her eyes, but her stance was steady. Dangerous. Jasper Kane, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the desert air. Right on time. Isabella. His voice came out rougher than he intended. You're the one who left the baby. My grandson, she said simply. Mateo's boy, born 3 months ago. The pieces fell into place like bullets finding their mark. Mateo Reyes, Isabella's son. The young hothead who'd been riding with the Dalton gang. The third shooter, who'd gotten away this morning after putting lead in Jasper's chest. Your boy tried to kill me this morning, Jasper said, adjusting his grip on the baby. The child had gone completely still, as if sensing the tension. And you killed his father. Seems fair. He tried. Isabella took a step closer, her hand moving to something behind her back. But Mateo's always been too soft. Couldn't finish what he started. So you finished it for him. Used his own baby as bait. Isabella's laugh was bitter as desert wind. That baby's name is Leo. Leo Reyes, not Leo Kane. You're not saving him, Gunslinger. You're delivering him. Jasper felt the trap closing around him like a noose. His gun hand was his right hand, but the baby was cradled in his left, and he was too weak from blood loss to draw fast enough. Isabella had positioned herself perfectly, close enough to talk, far enough to react if he tried anything. The coffin, he said, pieces still falling together. You carved my name in it. Where dead men belong, she said. Matteo couldn't kill you clean, so I thought I'd let you choose. Die here alone, or die knowing you'd saved a child whose father you murdered. The baby, Leo, made a soft sound, and Isabella's expression cracked for just a moment, a grandmother's love breaking through the vengeance. But here's what my boy didn't know, Isabella continued, her hand still behind her back. That baby's sick, been sick since birth. Needs medicine we can't afford, medicine that costs more than we'll ever have. Jasper understood now. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about desperation. You want my money. I want you dead, Isabella corrected. But I'll settle for your money and your life insurance policy. Word is you've got a bounty worth $2,500, plus whatever you're carrying. The baby's breathing seemed shallower now, and Jasper could feel tiny tremors running through the small body. Isabella wasn't lying about the sickness. What's wrong with him? Heart condition. Needs surgery back east. Costs more than most folks see in a lifetime. Isabella's voice broke slightly. So you're going to give me everything you have, and then you're going to die, knowing you at least did one decent thing in your miserable life. But something in Isabella's eyes told Jasper this wasn't going to end with just money. She'd waited too long for this moment to let him walk away, even dying. The question was, how much time did he have before she stopped talking and started shooting? The baby's breathing grew more labored in his arms. Jasper could feel each tiny struggle for air, and something inside him cracked wider than his bullet wound. This child was dying, and not slowly. Isabella hadn't been lying about the heart condition. How long does he have? Jasper asked, his voice softer than it had been in years. Isabella's composure faltered. The doctor in Black Creek said, weeks, maybe days without proper care. That's why. She stopped herself, but Jasper could see the desperation bleeding through her anger. That's why you set this trap. You're not just after revenge, you're trying to save him. Don't you dare try to make this about nobility, Isabella snapped. You destroyed my family, killed my husband for a $25. Argument in a card game. This baby is dying because we can't afford to save him. Jasper felt the weight of every life he'd taken settling on his shoulders like desert sand. Hector Reyes had been cheating at cards, true enough, but the man had also been trying to win money to feed his family. Jasper had known that and killed him anyway. The baby's eyes fluttered open, looking directly at Jasper with an expression that seemed to pierce straight through to his soul. Those weren't the eyes of someone dying. They were the eyes of someone fighting. There's a doctor in Santa Fe, Isabella continued, her voice breaking. A surgeon who can fix hearts like Leo's, but it costs $3,500. More money than my family will see in 3 lifetimes. Jasper had $5,000 in his saddlebags. Money from years of bounties, gunfights, and jobs that kept him alive but never let him live. Blood money that had never done anyone any good. You can have it all, he said quietly. Every cent. But you let me. Take him to that doctor first. Isabella's hand moved from behind her back, revealing an old Navy Colt. Her father's gun, if Jasper remembered right. You think I'm fool enough to trust the man who murdered my husband? I'm dying anyway, Jasper said, gesturing to the blood still seeping through his shirt. Got maybe 2 hours left. 3, if I'm lucky, but this baby could live if we stop wasting time and get him to Santa Fe. Santa Fe is 50 miles. You'd never make it. Then we go to Black Creek. Doc Miller's got basic supplies. Might be able to stabilize him long enough to make the trip. Isabella's gun wavered. Grandmother warring with widow. Love fighting hate. Why would you help him? After everything? The baby made a small sound, and Jasper looked down into those dark eyes again, because some things matter more than dying angry. For a moment, the desert was silent, except for the crackling fire and Leo's labored breathing. Isabella's gun stayed pointed at Jasper, but her finger moved away from the trigger. Mateo's waiting in Black Creek. she said finally. "If he sees you coming with his boy, he'll shoot you on sight. Then you better ride with us and make sure he doesn't." Isabella laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You want me to save the man who killed my husband? I want you to save your grandson." The baby's breathing suddenly became more shallow, and Jasper felt panic shoot through him like lightning. Leo's lips were turning slightly blue, and his tiny body was going limp. "He's getting worse," Jasper said urgently. "We need to move now." Isabella saw it too. Her gun lowered as she stepped forward, reaching for her grandson, but as her hands touched the baby, Leo's breathing seemed to steady slightly, as if being near family gave him strength to fight a little longer. "There's a wagon behind the cabin," Isabella said, her voice thick with tears she refused to shed. "Mateo brought supplies, thinking we'd need them. After get it hitched, fast." But as Isabella hurried toward the cabin, Jasper heard something that made his blood freeze. Hoofbeats, multiple horses riding hard and coming fast. Mateo wasn't waiting in Black Creek after all. He was coming here. And he was bringing friends. 3 riders crested the ridge, moving fast with dust clouds trailing behind them. Mateo Reyes rode in front, his face twisted with rage, even from a distance. The 2 men flanking him were Dalton gang survivors, the kind of men who'd shoot first and never bother asking questions. Isabella heard them too, and froze halfway to the wagon. "Mateo, no!" she shouted, but her voice was lost in the thunder of hoofbeats. Jasper had seconds to make a choice that would determine if the baby lived or died. He could try to draw his gun one-handed while holding Leo, but he was weak from blood loss and would likely miss. He could hand the baby to Isabella and try to fight, but that would leave the child in the crossfire. Or he could do something that went against every instinct he'd developed in 38 years of staying alive. He could surrender. "Isabella," he called out, "take him." She rushed back as the riders thundered into the clearing. Jasper carefully transferred Leo to his grandmother's arms. The baby's breathing was now so shallow it was barely visible. Isabella's eyes filled with tears as she felt how limp her grandson had become. Mateo's horse skidded to a stop, and he had his gun drawn before the dust settled. His face was a mirror of his father's, the same dark eyes, the same stubborn jaw. But where Hector had been desperate, Mateo was pure fury. "Get away from him, Mama!" Mateo shouted, his gun trained on Jasper. "Get away from that baby killer! Mateo! Stop!" Isabella stepped between her son and Jasper, Leo cradled protectively in her arms. "He was trying to help." "Help?" Mateo's voice cracked with disbelief. "He killed Papa. He's the reason Leo's dying." The other 2 riders spread out, flanking. The scene, Jasper recognized them now. Clay Dalton and his cousin Finn, bad men who'd been running cattle theft and bank jobs across 3 territories. They'd used Mateo's grief for their own purposes without a second thought. "The boy's right," Clay said, his gun also drawn. "Kane's got a bounty on his head worth more than this baby's medicine. We finish him here, collect the money. Everybody wins." "Except Leo," Jasper said quietly, his hands raised but his eyes on Mateo. "Your boy needs that. Doctor in Santa Fe, you kill me now, you'll never have enough money to save him." Mateo's gun wavered. "You're lying. $5,000 in my saddlebags. More than enough for the surgery, but only if we get him to a doctor in the next few hours." Isabella clutched Leo tighter, the baby's breathing becoming more erratic. "Mateo, listen to him. Leo's getting worse." "After what he did to Papa?" Mateo's voice broke. "You want me to trust him? I want you to save your son." The standoff stretched like a wire about to snap. 4 guns drawn, a dying man, a dying baby, and a family torn between justice and love. The desert sun climbed higher, each minute ticking away precious time Leo didn't have. Clay Dalton spat in the dust. "Enough talking. We came." Here to collect a bounty, not listen to sob stories. But Finn Dalton was staring at the baby in Isabella's arms, and something in his expression had changed. "Clay," he said quietly, "that baby looks real sick." "So what?" "So I got a kid too. Back. In Colorado." The admission hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. Jasper realized this was his moment, the crack in their resolve he could exploit. "Then you know what it's like," Jasper said to Finn, "watching your child suffer and not being able to help." Mateo's gun began to shake. Behind him, Clay Dalton was growing impatient, his finger tightening on the trigger. If you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button, because this is just the beginning of Jasper's journey toward redemption. But what Mateo decided in the next few seconds would determine if Leo lived to see another sunrise. And Clay Dalton wasn't planning to wait much longer for an answer. Clay Dalton's patience snapped like a dry twig. "Finn, what's wrong with you? We didn't ride out here to play nursemaid to some dying baby." "Maybe we should hear him out," Finn said, his voice uncertain, but his gun still raised. "Hear him out?" Clay's gun swung toward his own cousin. "The man's got a $2,500 bounty on his head, and you want to have a conversation." Mateo's face was a battlefield of emotions, rage at his father's killer, warred with desperation to save his son. Isabella watched her grandson's breathing grow weaker with each passing second, her own, tears finally falling. "Mateo," Isabella whispered urgently, "Leo doesn't have time for this." The baby's lips were definitely blue now, and his tiny chest barely moved. Jasper had seen enough death to recognize it approaching, and this child was losing the fight fast. "The wagon," Jasper said to Mateo, his voice steady despite the blood loss making him sway in the saddle. "Hitch it up. We can argue about my bounty after we save your boy." "Don't listen to him," Clay shouted. "He's trying to escape." "Where am I going to escape to?" Jasper gestured to the blood soaking his shirt. "I'm dying anyway, but that baby doesn't have to." Mateo's gun lowered slightly. For a moment, Jasper thought the young father might choose his son over revenge. But Clay Dalton had other plans. "Fine," Clay said, his gun swinging back toward Jasper. "We'll collect the bounty now and figure out the baby later." The shot rang out across the desert like thunder, but it wasn't Clay's gun that fired. Finn Dalton had put a bullet in his cousin's shoulder, sending Clay spinning to the ground with a curse that could be heard 3 counties over. "Finn!" Clay gasped, clutching his wounded arm. "What the hell?" "I told you," Finn said quietly, his smoking gun still in his hand. "I got a kid too." The sudden violence broke Mateo's paralysis. He holstered his gun and ran to Isabella, taking Leo from her arms. The baby was so still now that for a terrifying moment Jasper thought they were too late. "He's still breathing," Mateo said, his voice breaking. "Barely, but he's still fighting." Isabella was already running toward the cabin. "The wagon's ready. Mateo, help me get him in the back." But Clay Dalton wasn't finished. Despite his wounded shoulder, he was reaching for his gun with his good hand, his face twisted with rage and greed. Jasper saw it happening and made his choice. With the last of his strength, he drew his own gun and put a bullet in the ground inches from Clay's. "Good hand." "Next one won't miss," Jasper said, though the effort of drawing had nearly made him pass out. Clay looked up at him with pure hatred. "This ain't over, Kane." "Yes, it is." Finn Dalton dismounted and helped his wounded cousin to his feet. "Clay, we're leaving, now!" "You're making a mistake, Finn." "Maybe," Finn said, glancing at Leo in Mateo's arms, "but I can live with this mistake." As the Dalton cousins rode away, Clay still cursing and threatening revenge, Jasper felt his strength finally giving out. He slumped forward in his saddle, only Thunder's steady stance keeping him upright. "Mateo!" Isabella called from the wagon. "We need to go, now!" Mateo looked between his dying son and the man who'd killed his father. The choice that had seemed impossible minutes ago was now crystal clear. "Help me get him in the wagon," Matteo said to his mother. Isabella's eyes widened. "You mean he's coming with us?" "Leo needs that money, and Kane's the only one who knows where." "It is." As they carefully moved Jasper from his horse to the wagon bed, the gunslinger felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Not forgiveness. That would take more time than he had left. But something close to it. A chance to die for. Something other than pride or money. Leo lay beside him in the wagon, both of them fighting for every breath. But as Isabella climbed into the driver's seat and Matteo mounted his horse to ride alongside, Jasper allowed himself one small hope. Maybe this baby would live. Maybe some good could come from all the blood on his hands, but they still had to reach Black Creek alive, and the desert wasn't done testing them yet. The wagon wheels ground against the desert hardpan as Isabella pushed the horses harder than she should have. Every bump sent fresh waves of pain through Jasper's chest, but he bit back any complaints. Beside him, Leo's breathing had become so shallow it was barely visible. Matteo rode alongside the wagon, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon. Clay Dalton might have ridden off, but men like that didn't forget $2,500 bounties easily. They'd be back, probably with reinforcements. "How much further?" Isabella called over the noise of the wheels. 4 miles, Matteo answered, but his voice carried doubt. 4 miles was still too far for either of the dying passengers in the wagon bed. Jasper reached into his vest pocket with trembling fingers and pulled out a small leather pouch. Inside were pills Doc Miller had given him months ago for pain, laudanum-based, strong enough to put a man to sleep permanently if he took too many. But they might buy Leo time. "Isabella," he called out weakly. "Stop the wagon." "We can't stop. Leo's getting worse." "That's why. We need to stop." Isabella pulled on the reins, bringing the horses to a reluctant halt. Matteo dismounted quickly, his face showing the strain of watching his son fade away minute by minute. Jasper held up the pouch. Pain medicine. Strong stuff. Might slow his heart rate down, make him need less oxygen. Matteo's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "You want to drug my baby?" "I want to keep him alive long enough to reach the doctor." Jasper's voice was getting weaker, but his conviction was strong. "It's risky, but doing nothing is certain death." Isabella climbed into the wagon bed and looked at her grandson. Leo's lips were nearly purple now, and his tiny fingers had gone limp. She'd watched her husband die, and she recognized the signs. "How much?" she asked Jasper. "A quarter of a pill, dissolved in water. Might buy us an hour, maybe 2. Matteo's hands shook as he took the pouch. "What if it kills him? What if it saves him?" The young father stared at the pills, then at his dying son. It was a gamble with the highest possible stakes, his child's life. "Matteo," Isabella said softly, "your papa always said, sometimes you have to risk everything to save what matters most." Matteo's eyes filled with tears as he carefully broke off a quarter of one pill. Isabella had a small canteen of water, and they dissolved the fragment as carefully as possible. Getting the medicine into Leo required a patience they didn't have. The baby was so weak he could barely swallow, and every second of delay brought him closer to death. But finally, they managed to get the dissolved medicine down. Within minutes, Leo's breathing seemed to stabilize slightly. Not better, but not worse. "It's working," Isabella whispered. Matteo remounted his horse, hope and terror warring on his face. "Let's go!" But as Isabella snapped the reins and the wagon lurched forward, Jasper heard something that made his blood freeze, despite his fading strength. More hoofbeats, coming fast from behind them. Clay Dalton had found reinforcements after all, and this time he wasn't coming alone. Jasper forced himself to sit up, his gun heavy in his hand. Through the dust cloud behind them, he could count at least 7 riders. The Dalton gang wasn't just after his bounty anymore. They wanted revenge for Finn's betrayal, and they'd kill everyone in this wagon to get it. "Isabella," he said quietly, "we've got company." She looked back and saw the dust cloud. Her face went pale, but her grip on the reins tightened. "How long before they catch us?" Jasper judged the distance and their horse's condition. 10 minutes, maybe less. Leo's breathing remained steady from the medicine, but it wouldn't matter if they were all dead before. Reaching Black Creek, Mateo had seen the riders too. He spurred his horse closer to the wagon, his gun already drawn. "We can't outrun them," he said. "Not with the wagon." Jasper knew what that meant. Someone would have to stay behind and buy time for the others to escape, and there was only one person in this group who was already dying anyway. But as the hoofbeats grew louder behind them, Jasper realized he might not have enough strength left to make his final stand count. The riders were gaining fast, their horses fresh, while Isabella's team was exhausted from pulling the wagon across rough terrain. Jasper could make out Clay Dalton's face now, twisted with rage and determination. The wounded outlaw had gathered every gun for hire between here and the territory line. "Stop the wagon," Jasper said firmly. "What?" Isabella's voice cracked with panic. "Stop it! Now! If we keep running, they'll catch us in open ground. At least here we have the wagon for cover." Mateo rode closer, his face grim. "You want to make a stand? There's 7 of them and 1 of you." "I'm not much good in a gunfight then." "Then don't fight," Jasper said, struggling to climb out of the wagon bed. "Take Leo and run. There's a wash about a mile north. Get to it and keep going to Black Creek." Isabella jumped down from the driver's seat and helped steady him. "You can barely stand. How are you going to fight 7 men? Jasper checked his gun. 3 bullets left. Not nearly enough, but it would have to do. "I'm not planning to win, just planning to buy you time." "No," Mateo's voice was firm. "I won't let another man die for my family." "Your family." Jasper looked at the young father with something approaching respect. "Boy, you've got more backbone than your daddy ever did." The insult should have stung, but Mateo just smiled grimly. "Papa always said, courage isn't about not being scared. It's about doing what's right when you are scared." The hoofbeats were close, enough now to feel through the ground. Leo stirred slightly in Isabella's arms, the medicine keeping him stable, but still desperately sick. "Isabella," Jasper said urgently, "take him and go, now." But Isabella Reyes had spent 3 years planning revenge, and she wasn't about to run from Clay Dalton and his hired guns. She grabbed her husband's old rifle from the wagon and checked the ammunition. "Hector died defending our family," she said quietly. "Maybe it's time I did the same." The 3 of them formed a triangle around the wagon as the riders thundered closer. Jasper behind the wagon bed, Mateo near the front wheel, Isabella crouched by the water barrel. In her arms, Leo breathed steadily, unaware that his entire future was about to be decided by gunfire. Clay Dalton and his gang pulled up 50 yards away, just out of easy pistol range. Smart move. They'd learned to respect Jasper's aim, even if they didn't fear him anymore. "Kane!" Clay shouted, his wounded arm in a makeshift sling. "You cost me a fortune in bounty money. Time to pay up." "The only thing I owe you is a bullet," Jasper called back, surprised by how strong his voice sounded. 7 against 3. Clay laughed. "I like those odds." But Finn Dalton wasn't with them. Jasper noticed that immediately and filed it away as potentially important information. "Where's your cousin, Clay? He finally grow a conscience?" Clay's face darkened. Finn made his choice. Now he's going to live with it, or die with it. The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring. In Isabella's arms, Leo made a soft sound, not distress, but something almost like contentment. The medicine was working, giving him the strength to fight a little longer. That tiny sound seemed to break, something loose in the desert air. Clay Dalton drew his gun with his good hand, and the shooting started. Jasper's first shot took down the rider on Clay's left before the man could clear leather. His second shot went wide as pain flared through his chest, but it spooked another horse and sent its rider tumbling. Mateo's shot missed completely, but Isabella's rifle spoke with authority, dropping a third man from his saddle. But 3 guns against 7 was still losing odds, and Jasper felt his strength failing fast. Blood loss was making his vision blur, and his hands were starting to shake. Clay Dalton's return shot splintered wood near Jasper's head, sending splinters flying. The next volley would probably be the last one he'd ever hear. But then, from the ridge behind Clay's gang, came the sound of a rifle shot. One of Clay's men pitched forward, and chaos erupted in their ranks. Finn Dalton had come back after all, and he'd brought friends. As the Dalton gang found themselves caught between 2 groups of shooters, Jasper allowed himself one last smile. Maybe Leo would make it to that doctor after all. Maybe some stories could have happy endings, even in the unforgiving desert. The gunfight was fierce, but brief. When the dust settled, Clay Dalton lay face down in the sand, and his surviving men were riding hard for the horizon. Finn Dalton emerged from the rocks with 2 other men Jasper didn't recognize. "Told you this ain't over," Finn said, looking down at his cousin's body. "Guess I was wrong." Isabella clutched Leo tighter as the baby's breathing remained steady. The medicine had bought them the time they needed, and now the path to Black Creek was clear. Jasper felt his legs giving out and sat down hard against the wagon wheel. His vision was getting darker around the edges, but Leo was alive. That had to count for something. "Mateo," he said weakly, "my saddlebags, $5,000. Get your boy to that doctor." As Mateo retrieved the money that would save his son's life, Jasper closed his eyes and felt something he hadn't experienced in 38 years of violence. Peace. The desert sun climbed higher, but for the first time in longer than he could remember, Jasper Kane wasn't running from anything. He was exactly where he needed to be, doing exactly what needed to be done, and that baby was going to live. If you enjoyed this story of redemption in the Old West, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more tales of courage,